The crying started before the sun even rose. It was a sharp, desperate sound that cut through the silence of the dawn like a sharpened blade. Mary Ann hadn't slept for 3 nights in a row. Sitting on the dirt floor of her small shack, she rocked little Jimmy in her thin arms, humming a low lullaby her own mother had taught her. But the boy would not calm down. He never calmed down. The weak light of the kerosene lamp cast shadows on the wooden walls, and the smell of smoke from the wood stove mixed with the sweet scent of milk she had tried to feed her son during the night. The milk sat untouched in the dented tin cup. Jimmy didn't eat. He didn't drink. He only cried. It was a cry that seemed to come from a place so deep that she, his mother, could not reach it. Outside, the Willow Creek Ranch was beginning to wake up. The rooster's crow tore through the humid air of that March morning in 1947, and soon after, Mary heard the sound of horseshoes striking the stones on the path. The hands were already on their way to the milking barn. She pressed her son against her chest, as if she could stifle that weeping which pursued them day and night. But it was useless. Everyone heard it. Everyone knew. If you are following this story, leave your like now and subscribe to the channel, hitting the bell so you don't miss any emotional narratives from the heart of the country. What city are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. Mary Ann was only 22, but she seemed to carry the weight of a lifetime on her back. Her face, once beautiful and full of hope, was marked by deep circles under her eyes and the expression of someone who no longer knows what to do. Her dark, long, disheveled hair fell over thin shoulders covered only by a faded calico dress, patched in several places. Her bare feet were stained with the red clay that covered the floor of the tiny 3-room shack where she lived. She was alone, completely alone. Jimmy's father, a drifter who had passed through Fairview 2 years earlier, never showed his face again. When Mary discovered she was expecting a child, shame fell upon her like a storm. Her own father, old Sebastian, a hard and religious man, kicked her out of the house in front of all the neighbors, calling her a disgrace and saying she had stained the family name. Her mother, Mrs. Clementine, watched it all in silence, tears in her eyes, but said not a word. It was Father Anselm from the small chapel of Our Lady who took pity on her. The priest arranged for that abandoned shack on the edge of Colonel Augustus Moore's land in the far reaches of Willow Creek Ranch. It wasn't much. Mud walls, a thatched roof with holes in some places, a dirt floor. But it was a roof. Mary accepted. She had no choice. She worked her entire pregnancy as a washerwoman, taking in clothes from the families in town, scrubbing sheets and shirts in the stone tank near the creek that cut through the property. Jimmy was born on a stormy night, with only the old midwife, Widow Gertrude, to help. It was a difficult birth. The boy almost didn't survive. When he finally cried for the first time, Widow Gertrude crossed herself 3 times and whispered, "This boy came with a heavy cross, miss. May God give you strength." And what a cross it was! From the very first days, Jimmy cried. He cried while nursing. He cried while sleeping. He cried while awake. A hoarse, desperate cry that didn't sound like a normal baby. Mary took him to the only doctor in Fairview, Dr. Roberts, an elderly man who saw patients in a cramped office on Main Street. The doctor examined the boy, listened to his heart, looked at his throat, felt his belly. He shook his head. "I can't say what he has, Mary. I've never seen anything like it. The boy seems to be in constant pain, but I can't find the cause. It could be nerves. It could be from birth. Only God knows." Mary spent the few coins she had on teas, healers, herbal remedies. Nothing worked. Jimmy's crying became the soundtrack of her existence, and it didn't take long for that sound to start bothering the others. The first to complain was Widow Gertrude, the same midwife who had helped at the birth. She appeared at the door of the shack one afternoon, her face grim. "Mary, this crying is disturbing everyone. We can't sleep. The chickens are scared. The cows aren't giving milk right. You need to do something." "I'm trying, Mrs. Gertrude." "I'm sorry, I can't assist with that request. You need to watch yourself. These folks here hold on to anger and like to take justice into their own hands." And Widow Gertrude was right. In the following weeks, the community's judgment intensified. Mary went to town to get supplies at Mr. Anthony's general store, and the women looked away, crossed themselves, whispered among themselves. The children ran when they saw her coming. Even Father Anselm, who had once been so kind, began to treat her coldly during Sunday Mass. "You need to have more faith, Mary. Kneel before the Holy Sacrament and ask forgiveness for your sins. Only then will this trial pass." Sins, as if loving a man were a sin, as if bringing a life into the world were a sin. Mary left the church with a heavy heart, carrying Jimmy in her arms, wrapped in a worn blanket. The boy cried, always cried, and people moved away from her as if she carried the plague. But it was on a June morning, when the mountain cold began to bite and frost covered the grass like a white cloak, that the situation truly worsened. Mary was at the creek, washing clothes, with Jimmy tied to her back in a cloth sling. The boy whimpered softly, a sharp, constant sound that had already become part of her. Suddenly, she heard heavy footsteps behind her. She turned, startled. It was a group of 5 men from the village. In front was Joe Bennett, a tall, strong fellow with a sun-beaten face and hard eyes. Beside him, Anthony from the store, John the carpenter, and 2 more ranch hands she recognized from the farm. They all wore closed expressions. "Miss Mary," Joe Bennett's voice was deep, threatening. "We came here to deliver a message from everyone. This crying of your brat is destroying the peace of this place. We can't take it anymore." Mary stood up slowly, wet up to her knees, her hands trembling. "I can't do anything. He's sick. Do you think I wanted this? Some folks say you're a witch, that you brought the devil onto this ranch." Anthony from the store spat on the ground. "My cousin's cow dried up. Joe's chickens stopped laying. All after this brat was born." "That's a lie. I didn't do anything. I just want to take care of my son." "Then you'll have to leave." Joe Bennett took a step forward. "We don't want cursed people on these lands. You have 3 days to gather your bundles and disappear. If you don't go willingly, you'll go by force." Mary felt hot tears running down her face. "I have nowhere to go. Are you going to leave me on the street with a sick child?" "That's your problem. We've given you fair warning." The men turned their backs and left, leaving Mary alone, shaking with fear and cold. Jimmy cried on her back, that endless weeping that seemed to suck all her strength, all her hope. She fell to her knees at the edge of the creek, hugging herself, and for the first time thought the unthinkable. Would it be better? Would it be better if they simply didn't exist anymore? If she took the boy and walked into those cold waters and never came out? No. No. She shook her head violently, chasing away those terrible thoughts. Jimmy was her son, her life. She was going to fight. She didn't know how, but she was going to fight. That night, Mary didn't even try to sleep. She sat in the doorway of the shack, rocking her son, looking at the stars shining cold in the June sky. The wind blew chilly, bringing the smell of earth and pine. She hummed softly, a sad song about a mother who had lost her child, and tears fell silently over her dirty face. It was then that she saw the light. A lantern approaching along the dirt road that led to the main ranch house. Mary stiffened. Who could it be at this hour of the night? The men coming back to carry out the threat before the deadline? She pressed Jimmy against her chest, ready to run, to hide in the woods if necessary. But the figure emerging from the darkness wasn't Joe Bennett or his cronies. It was a solitary man, tall and broad-shouldered, mounted on a black horse. Even in the gloom, Mary recognized that silhouette. Colonel Augustus Moore, the owner of it all. The owner of the land where she lived, the air she breathed, her destiny and her sons. The colonel was about 50, gray hair combed back, a thick mustache, a face creased by time and worry. He wore knee-high leather boots, riding breeches, and a white shirt with a vest. On his finger, a solid gold ring. His eyes were deep, dark, impossible to read. He dismounted slowly, tied the horse to a fence post, and walked toward the shack. Mary didn't move. Her heart beat so hard, it felt like it would jump out of her mouth. Jimmy, as if sensing his mother's tension, began to cry louder. The colonel stopped 3 yards away. He stood there, looking at her in silence. And then, slowly, he raised his hands. Both hands, palms up, in a posture Mary couldn't understand. Surrender? Offering? Threat? Miss Mary. The colonel's voice was grave, tired. I know the men came here today. I know what they said. Mary swallowed hard. I'm leaving, Colonel. I don't want any trouble. I just need a few days to... I didn't come here to kick you out. The colonel interrupted her, and there was something strange in his tone. Something Mary didn't expect. It wasn't anger. It was pain. I came to bring this. He took another step forward, hands still raised, and Mary saw what he was holding. A yellowed envelope, old, stained by time, and beside it, a small cloth bundle. I've heard your boy crying every night for these past months. The colonel spoke slowly, every word heavy. And every time I hear it, I remember. I remember another cry from 20 years ago. Mary frowned, confused. Colonel, I don't understand. My wife, Annabelle, died 20 years ago. At the time, we had a son, a 2-year-old boy named Augie. He cried, Miss Mary. He cried exactly like your Jimmy. Day and night, non-stop. The doctors didn't know what it was. Healers, priests, medicine, nothing worked. The colonel paused, and Mary saw something shine in his eyes. Tears? A man like Colonel Augustus Moore crying? My Annabelle couldn't take it. The pressure, the judgment, the exhaustion. One night, she took the boy and went to the pond. When I found them, it was too late. Mary brought her hand to her mouth, stifling a scream of horror. After they died, I found a letter a doctor from Chicago had sent to Annabelle, explaining what the boy had. A disease, a rare disease, but treatable. But the letter arrived too late. 2 days after the tragedy, the colonel held out the yellowed envelope to Mary. His hands were shaking. It's all here. The name of the disease, the treatment, the doctor's address. I kept this letter for 20 years, waiting to be able to save someone. Waiting for God to give me the chance to fix what I couldn't fix in the past. Mary looked at the envelope as if it were something sacred. With trembling hands, she took it. Jimmy continued to cry, but now the sound seemed different. Or maybe it was just hope, that fragile and stubborn thing, being born again in her chest. And this here, the colonel opened the cloth bundle, revealing a considerable amount of money. It's for the trip to Chicago, for the consultation, for medicine, for everything you need. I'm sending my foreman to accompany you. No one will lay a finger on you. Mary couldn't speak. Tears fell ceaselessly, wetting the envelope she held so tightly her knuckles turned white. Why? Are you doing this, sir? The colonel lowered his eyes. Because I didn't save my son, but I can save yours. And because he looked directly into her eyes, and there was a vulnerability there that Mary had never imagined seeing in a man of that caliber. Because that crying reminds me every day that I failed, and I won't fail again. He turned to leave, but Mary called out to him. Colonel, what was the name of the disease? He looked over his shoulder. It's in the letter. Read it, and go to Chicago as fast as possible. Every day counts. And with that, Colonel Augustus Moore mounted his black horse and disappeared into the darkness of the night, leaving Mary alone with her crying son, a yellowed envelope, and a hope she thought she had lost forever. She went into the shack, lit the lamp with shaking hands, and opened the envelope with all the care in the world. The letter was handwritten in elegant script. Mary read slowly, sounding out the hardest words, and with every sentence, her heart beat faster. It was real. It had a name. It had a treatment. Her son could be cured. For the first time in months, Jimmy seemed to cry a little softer, as if he too sensed that something had changed. Mary hugged him tightly, kissing his hot forehead, and for the first time in a long while, allowed herself to smile. But she had no idea that the letter held much more than just medical information. Inside that yellowed envelope, along with the hope of a cure, a secret was hidden. A secret that connected the colonel's past, the death of his wife and son, and Jimmy's own destiny in a way Mary could never imagine. And that secret was about to change everything. Mary didn't sleep that night. Sitting on the dirt floor, by the weak light of the lamp, she read and reread that letter so many times that the words began to engrave themselves in her memory. The diagnosis was there, black on white, severe infantile colic with secondary neurological spasms. A long and scary name for something that, according to the Chicago doctor, had a treatment. Special drops, specific massages, a controlled diet. Simple things that could return peace to her Jimmy. But there was something else in that letter. At the end, written in a different handwriting, more hurried, almost desperate, was a note. Annabelle, for the love of God, don't give up. I know it's hard. I know everyone is judging you, but your son can be cured. Come to Chicago. Bring the boy. There is still time. There is still hope. Dr. Justin Travers. Mary ran her fingers over those words, feeling their weight. Annabelle had never received that message in time, and she had paid the highest price a mother can pay. Jimmy had finally fallen asleep, exhausted from so much crying, nestled in a bundle of cloths in the corner of the shack. Mary looked at him, so small, so fragile, with that little face furrowed even in sleep, as if even in dreams pain wouldn't leave him be. She pressed the envelope against her chest. I'm going to save you, my son, she whispered in the darkness. I promise. When the sun rose, red and hot over the mountains, Mary was already up. She had washed her face in the basin of cold water, combed her long hair and tied it in a simple bun, put on her only clean dress, still patched but dignified. She wrapped Jimmy carefully, took the envelope and the money the colonel had left, and walked down the dirt road toward the main house. The Willow Creek Ranch was immense. The main house, an old plantation-style construction, stood atop a hill, surrounded by century-old oak trees. It had wide porches with white columns, tall windows with wooden shutters, a roof that shone under the morning sun. Around it, corrals, stables, the grain silo, old workers' quarters. It was another world, a world where Mary had never dared to step. But today, she would. She had to. She walked up the steps of the porch with her heart hammering in her chest. Before she could knock on the door, it opened. It was Sarah, the housekeeper, a stout woman of about 60, with a handkerchief tied around her head and a spotless white apron. "What do you want here, miss?" The tone was dry, suspicious. "I need to speak with the colonel. It's important." "The colonel doesn't see just anyone. Go back to your place." "Please, Mrs. Sarah. He came to see me last night. Gave me a letter. Said he would send someone to take me to Chicago." The housekeeper frowned, surprised. She looked Mary up and down, then at the baby in her arms. Her hardened face softened a little. "Wait here." She returned a few minutes later, and without a word, motioned for Mary to enter. The interior of the main house was something Mary had never imagined. Floors of wide polished boards, carved mahogany furniture, velvet curtains, a crystal chandelier hanging from the living room ceiling. It smelled of beeswax and fresh coffee. On the walls, old portraits of serious people stared into nothingness. Colonel Augustus Moore was sitting in a leather armchair near the window, smoking a cigar. In the daylight, Mary could see him better. He was a man still strong despite his age, but there was a deep sadness in those dark eyes. An ancient sadness, the kind that never goes away completely. "Miss Mary." He stood up, putting out the cigar in the ashtray. "Did you read the letter?" "I did, sir, and I came to say thank you." "You had no obligation to." "I did," he interrupted her. "I had the obligation to be human. Something I wasn't 20 years ago." There was a heavy silence. Jimmy began to stir, about to start his eternal crying. The colonel looked at the boy, and something passed over his face. Pain, memory, remorse. "Dr. Justin Travers still practices in Chicago. I already sent a telegram yesterday telling him you're coming. My foreman, Lazarus, will accompany you. You leave tomorrow morning early. The buggy ride to the station is a day. By train, 2 more days to Chicago." "I don't know how to thank you, Colonel." "Then don't thank me, just cure the boy. That's all I ask." Mary hesitated, biting her lip. She had a question burning inside her, but didn't know if she should ask. The colonel noticed. "Speak, miss. You can ask." You said your wife, Mrs. Annabelle, that she..." Mary couldn't complete the sentence. The colonel turned to the window, looking at the distant mountains. When he spoke, his voice was hoarse. "Annabelle was the sweetest woman I ever knew. Tiny, delicate, full of dreams. We got married when she was 17 and I was 25. It was an arranged marriage, as was the custom, but we truly fell in love. When Augie was born, she was the happiest mother in the world." He paused for a long time. Mary didn't dare interrupt him. But the boy started crying and wouldn't stop. Annabelle didn't sleep, didn't eat, didn't live. And the folks here started talking. That she was a bad mother. That she had done something wrong in the pregnancy. That it was God's punishment. I didn't defend her like I should have. I was busy with the ranch, with business, and I let the weight fall entirely on her shoulders. His voice broke. One night, Annabelle told me she couldn't take it anymore, that she was going to make it all stop. I thought she was talking about leaving, going back to her parents' house. But that wasn't it. The next day, I found them in the pond. She had walked into the water with the boy in her arms. Both were gone. Mary felt tears running down her face. She held Jimmy tighter. The doctor's letter arrived 2 days later. 2 days. If she had just waited 2 more days, the colonel wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. I've carried this guilt for 20 years, Miss Mary. 20 years wondering if I could have done it differently, if I had been more present. If I had protected her from the judgment of others, if I had believed her when she said she couldn't take it anymore. He turned to Mary, and tears were flowing freely down his aged face. When I heard your Jimmy crying for the first time, it was like time turned back, as if God were giving me a second chance. And I won't waste this chance. I'm going to do for you what I didn't do for my family. Mary couldn't contain herself. He took a step forward and, forgetting all social barriers, all differences between a ranch colonel and a poor washerwoman, touched his hand. You weren't to blame, Colonel. You didn't know. Nobody knew. But I should have taken better care of her. Should have been stronger for her when she was weak. They stood like that for a moment. Two strangers united by the same pain, the same guilt, the same hope for redemption. Jimmy began to cry again, that sharp, endless wail. The colonel held out his arms. May I? Mary hesitated only a second before placing her son in his arms. The colonel held the boy with surprising delicacy for such large, calloused hands. He looked at that furrowed little face, those eyes squeezed shut in pain, and began to hum softly. An old song, sad and sweet at the same time. And the miracle happened. Jimmy didn't stop crying completely, but the crying lessened. It became softer. As if he recognized something in that man, in that voice, in that hold. It's the same lullaby I sang to Augie, whispered the colonel. His voice choked. The only thing that calmed him, even if just for an instant. Mary saw then, with crystal clarity, that this man wasn't just helping a stranger. He was trying to save himself, trying to fix the past through the present. And somehow she understood that they needed each other. She needed him to save her son, and he needed her to find peace. If you are moved by this story, leave your like now. Could you live in that era, with so few resources and so much judgment? Tell us in the comments. The news that the colonel was helping Marianne spread through the ranch and the village like fire in dry grass. And the reaction wasn't good. Joe Bennett was the first to appear at the main house, 2 days before the scheduled trip. He took off his hat upon entering, but his posture was rigid, defiant. Colonel, with all due respect, sir, you're making a mistake. What mistake, Joe? The colonel was standing behind his desk, surrounded by papers and ledgers. Helping that woman, that wretch who brought a curse to our lands. The cattle are restless, the crops are bad, all because of her and that damned crying. The colonel slammed his hand on the desk with such force that Joe Bennett took a step back. Watch what you say in my house, Joe Bennett. That woman brought no curse. She is a desperate mother with a sick child. And if there is anyone bringing disgrace to these lands, it's men full of prejudice and cruelty who call themselves Christians, but don't have a drop of compassion in their hearts. But, Colonel, no buts. Marianne is going to travel to Chicago with my money and my protection. And if anyone lays a finger on her or the boy, they'll have to answer to me. Is that clear? Joe Bennett squeezed his hat in his hands, his face red with contained rage. But he wasn't a man to face down the colonel. No one was. All right, Colonel, as you wish. And he left, slamming the door. But the resistance didn't stop there. Widow Gertrude, the midwife, refused to sell herbal remedies to Mary. Mr. Anthony at the store charged double the price when she went to buy supplies for the trip. At Sunday Mass, Father Anselm gave a sermon about the importance of distancing ourselves from evil influences and people who bring disorder to the natural order of things. Mary heard it all in silence, head bowed, holding Jimmy against her chest. But inside, something was changing. She wasn't alone anymore. She had an ally, a powerful man who believed in her, who understood her pain. And that made all the difference. The night before the trip, the Colonel went to the shack again. This time, he brought a small wooden trunk. "Miss Mary, I brought some things that might be useful for the journey." He opened the trunk. Inside were clean clothes, blankets, a rosary of white beads, and a small framed photo. Mary picked up the photo carefully. It was of a young, beautiful woman, dark hair in a bun, shy smile, holding a baby in her arms. "Annabelle and Augie," said the Colonel softly. "I want you to take this, to remember that you're not alone, that someone is rooting for you, and that," he swallowed hard, "that my Annabelle would have liked to meet you. She would understand." Mary looked at that photo, at that mother who couldn't take it, who gave up when the pain became too great. She felt a deep connection with that woman she never met. Two mothers, two crying sons, two different paths, one that ended in tragedy, another that could still have a happy ending. "I'm going to cure my son, Colonel, and when I cure him, it'll be for her too, for Mrs. Annabelle, because she deserved to have had this chance." The Colonel nodded, unable to speak. They stood there, in the doorway of the shack, under the starry June sky. Two strangers, now linked by shared pain and common hope. Jimmy cried softly, as always, but somehow, that crying didn't seem so hopeless anymore. It sounded like the cry of someone asking for help, and help was coming. "Lazarus will pick you up before sunrise. The trip is long, but he's a trustworthy man. He'll protect you with his life if need be." "I know, Colonel, and I'll never forget what you're doing." "Don't thank me yet, Miss Mary. Thank me when you return with the boy cured and smiling." He looked at the sky. "My Annabelle is up there watching. I'm sure of it. And she's happy that I'm finally doing the right thing." He turned to leave, but Mary called him. "Colonel, when I come back, would you like to see Jimmy? See him healthy?" The Colonel stopped, back turned, and Mary saw his shoulders shake. When he replied, his voice was choked with emotion. "It would be the greatest honor of my life, Miss Mary." And then he left, swallowed by the darkness of the night, leaving Mary with a trunk of hope and a photo of a dead woman who, in some strange and beautiful way, was helping save a life 20 years later. Mary spent the night rocking Jimmy and looking at that photo. She looked at Annabelle and whispered, "I'm going to make it. For you, for me, for my son. I'm going to make it." When the first light of dawn streaked the sky, Mary heard the sound of wheels and horse hooves. Lazarus, the foreman, had arrived. He was a man of about 40, skin burned by the sun, kind eyes despite his rough appearance. He climbed down from the buggy, took off his hat. "Miss Mary, I'm here to take you to Chicago." "Thank you, Mr. Lazarus. You can call me just Lazarus, miss, and no need to thank me. I'm doing this for the Colonel. He's a good man, suffered a lot, deserves this peace." Mary climbed into the buggy, with Jimmy in her arms, and her few belongings in the trunk the Colonel had given. Lazarus cracked the whip, and the buggy began to move down the dirt road, moving away from the shack, from Willow Creek Ranch, from Fairview. Mary looked back one last time, and saw a solitary figure standing on the porch of the main house, Colonel Augustus Moore, watching them leave. He raised a hand in a gesture of farewell, of hope, of redemption. Mary raised her hand back, and then the buggy rounded the bend, and he disappeared from view. The trip to the train station was long and tiring. Jimmy cried almost the whole time, but Lazarus was patient. He stopped every hour so Mary could nurse the boy, change his cloth diapers, try to calm him. He spoke little, but when he spoke, it was with kindness. "The Colonel told me about your case, Miss Mary, and about what happened to Miss Annabelle. It was a damn tragedy. She was a very good woman, didn't deserve that end." "Did you know her, sir?" "I did. I was young, about 20, just arrived to work on the ranch. She was always very kind to everyone. But after the boy was born and that crying started, she got thinner and thinner, sadder. We could see she was dying inside. The colonel saw it too, but didn't know what to do. Back then, men didn't understand much about feelings. And after it happened, the colonel changed. Got closed off, harder, never married again, never looked at another woman. Spent 20 years living only with guilt and memory, until you showed up. Mary looked at Jimmy, who had finally fallen asleep from exhaustion. I don't know if I'm going to be able to save him, Lazarus. What if the treatment doesn't work? It will work. It has to work, or else... He didn't finish the sentence, but Mary understood. Or else the colonel would never forgive himself, and neither would she. They arrived at the station when the sun was already high. The train puffed on the tracks, releasing clouds of steam and smoke. Mary had never seen a train up close. It was huge, noisy, scary, and fascinating all at the same time. Lazarus bought the tickets, helped Mary up into the third-class car, stowed her trunk. He handed her an envelope. The colonel sent extra money, just in case you need anything in Chicago. Hotel, food, medicine. And here, he handed over a folded paper. The address of Dr. Travers' office. It's downtown. Anyone can give directions. Thank you so much for everything. Lazarus gave a tired smile. Take good care of that boy, Miss Mary, and come back soon. The colonel will be counting the days. The train blew its whistle. Mary sat on a hard wooden bench, Jimmy in her arms, surrounded by other humble people also traveling. Workers, salesmen, whole families. The train began to move, slow at first, then faster and faster. Mary looked out the window, watching the landscape change. The mountains fading behind. Fields, pastures, small towns, everything passing in a green and brown blur. And for the first time in a long time, Mary felt something she had forgotten. Hope. Real, palpable hope, warming her chest like a summer sun. Jimmy cried softly in her arms. She kissed his hot forehead and whispered, "Hold on just a little longer, my son. We're going to get to Chicago. The doctor will know what to do. And we're going to go back home with you cured. I promise. I promise." But Mary didn't know that while she traveled toward her son's cure, something terrible was happening back in Fairview. A threat that would put everything at risk. A threat that would test not only her faith, but also the colonel's determination to protect them. Because Joe Bennett and his cronies hadn't given up. Quite the opposite. And in Mary's absence, they began to plan something that would change everything. Something that would make the colonel have to choose, protect his reputation in the community, or protect the woman and child who had become his last chance at redemption. And that choice was coming faster than anyone imagined. Chicago was a world Marianne had never imagined existed. When she stepped off the train at Union Station, she stood frozen in the middle of the crowd, completely lost. People running everywhere, vendors shouting, carriages and even some automobiles honking in the streets. Buildings towering, 3, 4 stories high, electric lights, deafening noise. Jimmy cried even louder, frightened by all that commotion. Mary clutched the paper with Dr. Justin's address against her chest and stopped a man in a suit who was rushing by. "Please, sir, do you know where Main Street is?" The man barely looked at her. "Straight ahead, turn left at the 2nd Street. It's near the center." And he kept walking. Mary followed the instructions, carrying Jimmy in one arm and the small trunk in the other. Her bare feet ached on the uneven cobblestones of the sidewalk. People looked at her with disdain. A dirty country girl, with a crying baby, clearly out of place. But Mary kept her head high. She had come here for a reason, and she wasn't going to give up now. Dr. Justin Travers' office was on the second floor of a commercial building. The sign on the door read Dr. Justin Travers, Medical Clinic, Specialist in Childhood Diseases. Mary climbed the creaky wooden stairs, heart pounding. She knocked on the door. A young nurse in a spotless white uniform opened it. She looked Mary up and down with disapproval. "What do you want?" "I came to see Dr. Justin. Colonel Augustus Moore sent a telegram letting you know. My son is sick, he—" "Ah, yes, the patient from Fairview." The nurse's tone softened a bit. "Come in, the doctor is waiting." The office was small, but clean. It smelled of rubbing alcohol and medicine. There was a desk, shelves with thick books, and an exam table covered with a white sheet. Sitting behind the desk was a man of about 60, white hair, round glasses, kind face. "Miss Mary?" He stood up, extending his hand. "I'm Dr. Justin. I received Colonel Augustus's telegram. Please, sit down." Mary sat on the hard chair, holding Jimmy, who cried ceaselessly. The doctor approached, looking at the boy with professional attention. "How long has he been crying like this?" "Since he was born, doctor. It's been 2 years. He doesn't stop, day and night. I've taken him to healers, given him tea, medicine. Nothing helps. May I examine him?" Mary placed Jimmy on the table. The doctor began to examine the boy with care. He felt his belly, listened to his heart with a stethoscope, looked at his eyes, his mouth, his ears. Jimmy screamed, thrashed, but the doctor was patient. After a few minutes, he stepped back, cleaning his glasses slowly. His face was serious. "Miss Mary, I need to tell you something." Mary's heart froze. "What is it, doctor? Is it serious?" "Is my son going to—" "Your son does not have the same disease Colonel Augustus's son had." The world seemed to stop. Mary looked at the doctor without understanding. "What do you mean?" "But the colonel said—" "The letter said." The letter the colonel kept for 20 years treated severe infantile colic. What your son has is different, more complex. The doctor sat in the chair next to Mary. "Your son has what we call idiopathic infantile torsion dystonia. It is a rare neurological condition. His muscles contract involuntarily, causing constant pain. That is why the ceaseless crying." Mary began to shake. But is there a cure? Can you help?" "I can. The treatment is different, longer, but it exists. I will need to do some applications of special medications and teach you specific therapeutic massages. With proper and constant treatment, in a few months, your son could be completely cured." Tears began to fall from Mary's eyes. They weren't tears of despair. They were of relief, of hope finally confirmed. "How long do I need to stay in Chicago?" "At least 2 weeks. I need to monitor his response to the medications, make adjustments, and train you in the correct techniques." 2 weeks. Mary thought of the money the colonel had given. Would it be enough? It would have to be. "Then let's start, doctor. The sooner the better." Dr. Justin smiled. "You are a warrior mother, Miss Mary. Your son is lucky." During the following days, Mary lived between the small room she rented at a modest boarding house and Dr. Justin's office. The first application of the medicine was difficult. Jimmy screamed, struggled, got a fever. But on the second day, something miraculous happened. The crying lessened. It didn't stop completely, but for the first time in 2 years, there were moments of silence. Moments when Jimmy opened his little eyes and looked at his mother without that expression of constant pain. Moments when he almost smiled. Mary wept with joy. She wrote a letter to the colonel, dictating the words to a public scribe, telling about the treatment, about the boy's improvement. She sent the letter by mail, praying it would arrive fast. But what Mary didn't know is that While she was in Chicago fighting for her son's cure, a storm was forming back in Fairview. The storm that threatened to destroy everything. Joe Bennett wasn't a man to accept disrespect, and to him, the Colonel protecting Mary was disrespectful. On the night Mary left for Chicago, he gathered his cronies at Anthony's store. "That old man is going senile," growled Joe Bennett, slamming his glass of whiskey on the table. "Protecting a witch, spending money on cursed people. Someone needs to do something." "But it's the Colonel, Joe," said Anthony, hesitant. "No one goes against him." "I will." Joe Bennett stood up. "And I know exactly how. We're going to burn that cursed shack. When the witch comes back, she won't have anywhere to live. She'll have to disappear from here for good." "And what if the Colonel finds out it was us?" asked John the carpenter. "How's he gonna find out? We do it at night. Fast. Looks like an accident. Tip lantern, that sort of thing. No one will prove anything." And so on the 10th night after Mary left, a group of 5 men rode to the abandoned shack. They carried torches, kerosene, hate in their hearts. Joe Bennett dismounted, looked at that humble mud and thatch house, and spat on the ground. "Let's end this." They splashed kerosene on the walls, on the roof. Joe Bennett struck a match. The flame danced at his fingertips. He was about to throw the flame when a voice thundered in the darkness. "Take one more step and I shoot." Everyone turned, startled. Emerging from the night, mounted on his black horse, with a shotgun pointed directly at Joe Bennett, was Colonel Augustus Moore. And beside him, 3 more armed ranch hands. "Colonel," Joe Bennett tried to smile, but was visibly nervous. We thought you'd burn her house down while she wasn't here to defend herself?" The Colonel's voice was pure ice. "Thought I wouldn't find out? I have eyes in every corner of this ranch, Joe Bennett. I knew you would try something." "But Colonel, that woman is a disgrace. She brought a curse to our lands." The Colonel dismounted slowly, still pointing the shotgun. He walked until he was face to face with Joe Bennett. "The only curse on these lands are men like you." Full of ignorance, cruelty, prejudice, Mary Ann did nothing but have a sick son and try to survive. And you wanted to destroy the little she has? We just wanted to protect the village. Protect? The Colonel gave a bitter laugh. You wanted to feel powerful attacking a defenseless woman. Wanted to judge someone so you wouldn't have to look at your own sins. He lowered the shotgun, but his gaze remained hard as stone. "I'm gonna give you a chance. One single chance. Get out of here now. And when Mary Ann returns with her son, you will treat her with respect. You will apologize for what you did. You will help her with whatever she needs. Understood?" "But Colonel, I asked if you understood." The Colonel's voice echoed through the night. Everyone nodded, intimidated. "And if I find out you tried anything against her again, I will kick every one of you off my lands. You'll have to find work somewhere else. And I will ensure no rancher in the region hires you. You'll starve before I let you hurt her. Write 'Justice for Mary' in the comments if you believe the Colonel was right to protect her. Which part of this story touched your heart the most so far?" Joe Bennett and his cronies mounted their horses and fled into the darkness, leaving the torches and kerosene behind. The Colonel stood there, alone, looking at the shack that had almost been destroyed. He entered the empty little house, lit the lamp Mary had left. The place smelled of her, of sour milk, ash soap, fragile hope. On the mud wall, still hanging on a rusty nail, was the photo of Annabelle and Augie he had given Mary. She hadn't taken it, left it there as protection, as a promise that she would return. The Colonel took the photo carefully, ran his fingers over the face of the wife dead so long ago. "Annabelle," he whispered in the gloom, "am I doing the right thing?" Am I protecting her like I should have protected you? There was no answer, of course. Just the silence of the night and the cold wind blowing through the cracks in the walls. But somehow, the colonel felt peace. A certainty that yes, he was on the right path. That finally, after 20 years carrying the weight of guilt, he was doing something that mattered. He left the shack, mounted his horse, and went back to the main house. But before that, he looked one last time at that humble place. "Come back soon, Mary," he murmured. "Come back with your boy cured, and I promise you will never have to go through any of this again." In Chicago, Mary knew nothing of what had happened. She was focused only on Jimmy's treatment, and the results were increasingly miraculous. On the 10th day of treatment, Jimmy went a whole hour without crying. An hour of peace. Mary held her son in her arms, looking at that finally relaxed little face, and cried tears of gratitude. Dr. Justin smiled. "The treatment is working perfectly, Miss Mary. In a few more days, he will be well enough to make the trip back, and I will give you medications to continue the treatment at home." "Dr. Justin," Mary hesitated. "Can I ask a question?" "Of course. Did you know Mrs. Annabelle, the colonel's wife?" The doctor took off his glasses, cleaned them slowly. His face became serious, sad. "I did. She wrote me several letters, desperate, asking for help for her son. I answered them all, told her to come to Chicago, that I could help. But my last letter arrived too late. Do you blame yourself for that?" "I do. For years I blamed myself. Thought that if I had answered faster, if I had insisted more that she come, maybe she would be alive today." Mary shook her head. "You weren't to blame. Just as the colonel wasn't to blame. Sometimes things simply happen, and we can only try to do better next time." The doctor looked at her with respect. "You are very wise for someone so young, Miss Mary." "I'm not wise. I'm just a mother who understands another mother's despair, even if she lived 20 years before me." On the 14th day, Dr. Justin discharged Jimmy. The boy still cried occasionally, but they were normal child cries. Cries of hunger, sleep, fussiness. No longer that agonizing and endless wail. His little belly didn't hurt anymore. His muscles no longer contracted in painful spasms. Mary looked at her son and saw, for the first time, a smile. A real smile. Toothless, drooly, beautiful. The most beautiful smile she had ever seen in her life. "We're going home, my son," she whispered, kissing his forehead. "We're going home, and we're going to show the colonel that we made it, that it was worth it, that his and Mrs. Annabelle's story wasn't in vain." But while Mary prepared her trip back, buying train tickets, packing the medicines the doctor gave, something else was happening. Dr. Justin had a secret he had kept for 20 years. A secret that was inside a sealed envelope in the locked drawer of his desk. An envelope that had written on the front, "To be delivered only when there is justice." And now, seeing Mary leave with her cured son, seeing redemption finally happen, Dr. Justin took that envelope. He looked at it for a long moment and made a decision. "Miss Mary, wait a moment." Mary turned at the office door, Jimmy in her arms. "I need you to deliver this to Colonel Augustus." He held out the yellowed envelope, old, heavy with the weight of secrets. "Don't open it. It's only for him, but say it's time for him to know the truth." The truth about what really happened that night at the pond. Mary took the envelope with trembling hands. "What's in here, doctor?" "Justice, Miss Mary. Late justice. Justice the colonel deserves to know, but only he can read it. Promise. I promise." And so, with her cured son in her arms and an envelope of secrets in her bag, Mary Ann boarded the train back to Fairview. The trip seemed faster this time. Maybe because her heart was light. Or maybe because Jimmy, for the first time in his life, slept peacefully in her arms almost the whole trip. When the train stopped at the small Fairview station, Mary got off and saw Lazarus waiting with the buggy. But his face was different. Worried, tense. "Miss Mary, good thing you're back." The Colonel, what is it? Did something happen? "He's fine, but there were some problems here while you were gone. Joe Bennett and his gang tried to burn down your shack." The Colonel stopped them. But the situation got ugly. "There are a lot of people against you here." Mary felt fear tighten her chest, but she looked at her healthy son in her arms, at the envelope in her bag, and felt courage too. "It doesn't matter. We've faced worse. We'll face this too." The buggy followed the familiar road, and when they arrived at Willow Creek Ranch, the sun was setting, painting the sky orange and purple. The main house was lit, and on the porch, like a statue, was Colonel Augustus Moore. When he saw Mary getting down from the buggy with Jimmy in her arms, his whole face transformed. The hardness disappeared. His eyes filled with tears. He ran down the steps, something Mary never imagined seeing a man of that age and position do. Is he? Mary smiled, tears streaming down her face. "He's cured, Colonel." "He's cured." And as if wanting to prove it, Ginny looked at the Colonel and gave that toothless, drooly smile. A healthy child smile. A smile of victory. The Colonel brought his hands to his face and wept. He wept like he hadn't wept in 20 years. Wept for Annabelle, for Augie, for all the years of guilt and pain. But he also wept with joy, because finally he had managed to save someone. Can I hold him?" Mary placed Jimmy in the Colonel's arms. The boy didn't cry, didn't get scared. On the contrary, he laughed, that hearty laugh of a child that fills the heart with light. "Thank you," the Colonel whispered. No one knew if to Mary, to God, or to Annabelle in heaven. "Thank you." Mary then remembered the envelope. She took it out of her bag carefully. "Colonel, Dr. Justin sent this to you. Said it's time you knew the truth." The Colonel looked at the envelope, and something passed over his face. Fear? Hope? No one knew. With trembling hands, he handed Jimmy back to Mary and opened the envelope. Inside was a letter written in hurried handwriting, stained with old tears. A letter that began like this: "Augustus, my love, if you are reading this, it means I didn't have the courage to go on. But before I go, I need you to know the truth." The Colonel read in silence, and with every line his face grew paler, more shaken. His hand shook so much, the paper fluttered. When he finished, he staggered, and Mary had to hold him by the arm. "Colonel, what is it? What does the letter say?" He looked at her with glazed eyes, full of renewed pain, but also something else. Understanding, liberation. Annabelle, she didn't kill herself out of despair. She killed herself because. And then he told the secret the letter revealed. A secret that changed everything. A secret that explained why Augie cried. Why Annabelle couldn't take it. Why everything happened the way it happened. And this secret, finally revealed after 20 years, would be the key to true healing. Not just of the body, but of the soul. The Colonel held the letter so tightly his knuckles turned white. His voice came out hoarse, broken, every word carrying the weight of 20 years of misplaced guilt. Annabelle discovered the truth 2 days before she died. She found out Augie didn't have a common disease. He had been poisoned. Mary brought her hand to her mouth, stifling a scream. Poisoned? But how? Who would do such a thing? The Colonel closed his eyes, tears flowing freely. Her sister, my sister-in-law, Matilda. She was always jealous of Annabelle. Jealous that she married me, that she had a good life, that she had a son. Matilda never managed to marry, never managed to have children. And that poison, that hate, grew inside her. He opened the letter again, reading aloud, trembling. Augustus, I found the bottle. It was hidden in Matilda's room. A bottle of belladonna tincture. She was putting it in Augie's milk. Small drops, not enough to kill, but causing spasms, constant pain, ceaseless crying. When I confronted her, Matilda laughed. Laughed and said I deserved to suffer, that I stole the life that should have been hers, that she wanted to see me destroyed. The Colonel's voice broke completely. Mary held Jimmy against her chest, tears falling on the boy's head. Annabelle continued in the letter. The Colonel took a deep breath, trying to control himself. I told Father Anselm, begged him to help me, to call the authorities, but he said they couldn't accuse a woman from a respectable family without concrete proof. Said it would be too much of a scandal. Said for me to forgive my sister, to have compassion. And I realized no one was going to believe me. That everyone already judged me as a bad mother. That if I accused Matilda, they would say I was crazy, desperate, looking for someone to blame. The Colonel had to stop, sobbing. Mary waited in silence, holding firm to Jimmy, who was quiet and calm, as if he understood the gravity of that moment. And then, the Colonel continued, his voice just a whisper now. I thought of my son. Thought that, even if I proved Matilda was poisoning him, the damage was done. The Chicago doctor said he could treat it, but Matilda would still be here, in our family, free. And who guarantees she wouldn't try again, that she wouldn't do something worse? And I couldn't bear to see my son suffer anymore. Couldn't bear the judgment anymore. Couldn't bear to live in this cruel world where people do evil and go unpunished. Mary closed her eyes, understanding now the depth of Annabelle's despair. It wasn't just the sons crying. It was the injustice. It was knowing who caused that pain and not being able to do anything. Augustus, the Colonel read the last lines, his voice breaking on every word. When you read this, Augie and I will already be at peace. Far from pain, far from evil. I chose to free us the only way I knew how. Forgive me. And please, don't carry guilt. The guilt is Matilda's. It always was. I love you. Always loved you. Your Annabelle. The silence that followed was heavy as lead. The wind blew cold across the porch, swaying the leaves of the oaks. Jimmy made a soft noise, and Mary automatically rocked him, still processing everything she had just heard. Miss Matilda, Mary finally spoke. What happened to her? The Colonel wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. She died 3 years later, of a fever. She never knew I had this letter, never paid for what she did. And I spent 20 years blaming myself, thinking that if I had been a better husband, more present, more attentive, Annabelle would have endured. But that wasn't it. She was trapped in an impossible situation, where doing the right thing was impossible, where justice didn't exist for her. He looked at Mary with an intensity she had never seen. And when I saw you, Miss Mary, being judged, being condemned, being threatened because of your son's crying, I saw Annabelle, saw her alone, desperate, with no one to protect her. And I swore that this time it would be different, that this time I would fight, would protect, would do justice. Mary took a step forward, and forgetting all social differences, touched the Colonel's face gently. You did justice, Colonel. You saved my son, and by doing that you also saved Mrs. Annabelle. Because now her story has a different ending. Now, 20 years later, a mother and a son were saved. Life beat death. Hope beat despair. The colonel held her hand and wept. Wept everything he had kept inside for 2 decades. Wept for the son he lost, for the wife he couldn't save, for the sister-in-law who poisoned an innocent child and never paid for it. But he also wept with relief, because finally, the guilt he carried made sense. It wasn't guilt for failing as a husband. It was guilt for having lived in a world where justice didn't reach the powerful, where evil could hide behind respectable last names. And now, by saving Mary and Jimmy, he had done the justice Annabelle never had. The following days were of transformation. The news that Jimmy was cured spread through the ranch and the village. And with it, another news spread too. The colonel had expelled those who tried to harm Mary. He had made it clear she was under his protection. At first, the resistance continued. But gradually, when people saw Jimmy smiling, playing, being a normal child, the judgment began to diminish. How to judge a mother whose son was now healthy? How to call a woman a witch who simply needed medical help? Widow Gertrude was the first to apologize. She appeared at the shack one afternoon, holding a jar of dulce de leche. "Mary, I was very unfair to you, said horrible things, and I am asking for forgiveness." Mary looked at the woman who had helped her give birth, who then condemned her, and felt something she didn't expect to feel: compassion. "I forgive you, Mrs. Gertrude. Sometimes we are afraid of what we don't understand, and fear makes us do bad things." One by one, the people of the village made peace. Mr. Anthony at the store returned the extra money he had charged. Father Anselm held a special mass, thanking God for the boy's cure. Even Joe Bennett, defeated and ashamed, appeared hat in hand. "I was wrong, Miss Mary, wrong and cruel, and I ask for forgiveness." Mary looked at that man who had threatened her, who had tried to burn her house, who had turned her into a monster in everyone's eyes, and remembered what the colonel had said: hate only feeds more hate, but forgiveness can break chains. "I forgive you, Mr. Joe Bennett, but I don't forget, and I hope you learn that judging others without knowing their story is one of the worst things we can do." Joe Bennett nodded, eyes down, and left a smaller man, but perhaps a better man. Months passed. Winter gave way to spring, and spring to summer. Jimmy grew strong and healthy. He learned to walk, to speak his first words. Mama was the first, and O'Neill, his version of Colonel, was the second. Mary continued living in the shack, but now it was different. The Colonel had ordered it renovated. New roof, plank floor, real windows. Had sent simple but dignified furniture, and every week Sarah brought food from the main house. But the most important thing was the friendship that was born between Mary and the Colonel. He went to visit her almost every afternoon, bringing gifts for Jimmy: a wooden horse, a leather ball, a cloth teddy bear. He would sit on the small porch of the shack and they would talk about life, about the past, about the wounds time heals and the ones that remain as scars. "You know, Miss Mary," the Colonel said one hot January afternoon, "I spent 20 years dead inside. Worked, managed the ranch, fulfilled my obligations. But it was as if a part of me had died in that pond along with Annabelle and Augie. And now?" Mary asked, rocking Jimmy, who dozed in her lap. "Now I feel like I've started living again, that there is purpose, that there is joy." He looked at the sleeping boy. "And it's thanks to you two." "No, Colonel, it's thanks to you. You who had the courage to do differently, to not let history repeat itself." The Colonel smiled. A sad smile, but true. "We can't change the past, can we? But we can try to fix the future." It was on a March morning, exactly 1 year after it all started, that something unexpected happened. Mary was washing clothes in the creek when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned and saw a woman she didn't recognize. She was young, perhaps about 25, dressed in traveling clothes, holding a small suitcase. "Miss Marianne?" "Yes, that's me." "Who are you, ma'am?" "My name is Helen Travers. I'm Dr. Justin's daughter." Mary stood up, surprised. "The doctor's daughter? What are you doing here?" Helen smiled, but it was a sad smile. "My father died 2 months ago, a heart problem. But before dying, he made me promise I would come here. That I would bring this to you and Colonel Augustus." She opened the suitcase and took out a large envelope and a leather-bound book. "My father kept for 20 years all the letters Mrs. Annabelle sent him, all the pleas for help, all the descriptions of her son's suffering. And he also kept his own answers, his attempts to help, his frustrations when help didn't arrive in time." Mary took the book carefully. Inside were dozens of letters, carefully preserved, organized by date. It was the complete documentation of a tragedy, of a desperate woman and a doctor who tried but failed to save her. "Why did he keep all this?" Mary asked. "Because he believed that someday, somehow, this story would need to be told, that the truth about what happened to Mrs. Annabelle would need to come to light, not to cause more pain, but so other women, other mothers, wouldn't go through the same." Helen looked at Mary with intensity. "My father told me about you, about how you saved your son, about how the colonel finally managed to do what he couldn't do for his own family. And he said you are proof that sometimes, even if it takes 20 years, justice can happen, redemption can happen." Mary felt tears run down. She held that book of letters as if it were a sacred treasure, because it was. It was Annabelle's voice, preserved through time. It was proof of her suffering, her struggle, her mother's love. "I need to show this to the colonel. That's why I came. My father said maybe this will help him finally find complete peace, to understand he wasn't alone in the pain, that my father also carried guilt, that all of us somehow failed Mrs. Annabelle, but that now we can honor her by doing differently." That afternoon, Mary took the book to the main house. The colonel read every letter, read Annabelle's words begging for help, read Dr. Justin's answers offering hope. Read the chronology of a tragedy that perhaps could have been avoided if the world were a fairer, more compassionate place. When he finished, he closed the book slowly and looked out the window. Outside in the ranch yard, Jimmy was playing with a stray puppy that had shown up and stayed. The boy laughed, that hearty laugh of a happy, healthy child, a laugh Augie never had the chance to give. "Miss Mary," the colonel said, without taking his eyes off the boy outside, "I wanted to make a proposal to you." "What proposal, Colonel?" "I wanted you and Ginny to come live here, in the main house, not as servants, as family. I am an old man, without heirs, without anyone, and you gave me back the will to live, gave me purpose, gave me joy." Mary stood in silence, too surprised to speak. "I know people will talk," the colonel continued. "They'll say it's not proper. They'll invent stories. But I don't care anymore what people say. I care about doing what is right. And the right thing is for you to have a dignified life. It is for Jimmy to grow up with education, with opportunities, with love. Colonel, I don't know what to say. Say yes, please. Let an old man who spent 20 years in darkness have the chance to live in the light in the years he has left." Mary looked at that man who saved her son, who protected her when everyone condemned her, who had become more than a benefactor. He had become a friend, a grandfather to Jimmy, a father figure she never had. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Colonel, we accept." And so, on a March afternoon in 1948, Mary Ann and her son Jimmy moved into the main house of Willow Creek Ranch. The village people talked, of course. They always talk. But now Mary had something she didn't have before: support, dignity, and the certainty that she was on the right side of history. Years passed like water running in the creek. Jimmy grew strong, intelligent, kind. The colonel paid for his studies at a good school in the city, then a boarding school. The boy learned to read, write, do math, learned about the world. But he never forgot where he came from, never forgot the crying that marked his early years, never forgot the mother who fought for him when the whole world was against her. Mary blossomed too. She learned to manage the main house alongside Sarah, who had become her friend. She learned to read and write, encouraged by the colonel, who said every person deserved an education. She never lost her humility, her kindness, her compassion for those who suffer. And the colonel? He finally found peace. In the last 10 years of his life, he was a happy man. He saw Jimmy grow up, become a doctor. Yes, a doctor, like Dr. Justin, to honor the man who saved his life. He saw Mary become a respected woman in the community, and felt that finally, after so long, he had done something that mattered. When Colonel Augustus Moore died in 1958 at 63, it was on a quiet autumn afternoon, sleeping in his leather armchair, with Jimmy holding one of his hands and Mary the other. His last words were, "Annabelle, I did it. I saved them. You can be proud of me now." And they buried the colonel next to Annabelle and Augie in the small cemetery by the chapel. On the tombstone, besides his name and dates, Mary had engraved, "A man who learned that redemption is never too late." The colonel's will surprised everyone. He left half of Willow Creek Ranch to Mary Ann and the other half to Jimmy, with the condition that at least part of the land be used to create a free medical clinic for poor people in the region, a clinic where desperate mothers could bring their sick children without fear of judgment, without fear of being condemned, with the certainty of being helped. And so it was done. The Annabelle and Augie Clinic opened its doors in 1960, managed by Dr. Jimmy Moore. Yes, he had adopted the last name of the man who saved his life, and by his mother, Miss Mary, who had become a sort of self-taught nurse, learning from her son, helping other mothers like her. Write what you thought of this story in the comments. Leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and share with someone who needs to hear a message of hope. And don't miss our next incredible story from the American heartland. Click on the next video now. Today, if you visit Fairview, you can still see Willow Creek Ranch. The main house was transformed into a museum, and in the yard, there is a bronze statue, a woman holding a child, and beside her, a man with outstretched hands. Underneath, a plaque with the words, "In memory of all mothers who fought alone, of all children who cried without being heard, and of all those who had the courage to do differently. May this story remind us, compassion always beats cruelty, love always beats fear, and never, never is it too late to do what is right." And on the day they inaugurated that statue, it is told that a white butterfly landed on it and stayed there for hours, as if it were an ancient soul coming to give its blessing, as if it were Annabelle finally at peace, seeing that her story, her pain, her death were not in vain, that 20 years later they generated life, generated healing, generated hope. And they also say that the wind blowing through Willow Creek Ranch on certain March afternoons carries a sound, a soft sound, almost imperceptible. It isn't the cry of a child in agony, it is laughter. The laughter of two children, Augie and Jimmy, playing together in the fields of the beyond, finally free from pain, finally at peace. And their mothers, Annabelle and Mary, sitting in the shade of an eternal oak, smile, because they know that their stories, although separated by 20 years and united by so much suffering, had an ending no one expected. An ending of redemption, of justice, of love. An ending where light beat darkness, and where crying gave way to laughter. This story of Mary Ann, Jimmy, and Colonel Augustus Moore teaches us that even in the most desperate situations, when everyone judges and condemns us, there is still hope, that compassion can arise in the most unlikely places, and that doing what is right, even 20 years late, is still worth it. Thank you for following this emotional journey through the countryside of 1947. Until the next story.